What up, guys? So today we got a question from Brent, who is a blue belt down in Atlanta. He says, "Hey, Chewy, thanks for all you do for the BJJ community. I really enjoy all your content. I've purchased your takedown series as well as your butterfly guard series. Both are great. Appreciate you, Brent. Appreciate the support." He says, "I'm curious about your mindset going into competition. How do you balance having confidence in yourself and not underestimating your opponent? Anything to chew on would be greatly appreciated." Spoken like a true email subscriber with a chew on. By the way, if you guys want to get my daily email letter, you can check the links down below to get it. So check this out, Brent. Let's dive into it. I'll give you a couple ideas to chew on, as you referred to. And again, I've messed this up before. I went really hard into overestimating my opponents in some cases, and then again, figured things out. Again, I've been competing since 2000, right, in wrestling, and figured things out along the way. But the first thing I want you to think about is when it comes to winning a competition match, right, because that's why we get into competitions, we want to win. What does that require from us, right? What does that really mean when you're saying I want to win a match? What does that boil down to? Again, everybody has their own ideas on this, but in my bearded philosophy, it is basically using my techniques and positions and jiu-jitsu style successfully against someone. That's really what it comes down to. I'm going to use my BJJ techniques against someone else successfully. I win matches. And the better you are as a competitor, the more you begin to use the same techniques over and over again, the same positions over and over again, to the point where, in your gym, you'll become known for a position. When you go to competitions, you'll become known for a position. This is why when you watch some of the best competitors out there, a lot of times they have a position or technique that they are synonymous with because they've used it so many times, right? Because when we go into competition, it's never about our, deep knowledge of jiu-jitsu and having this wide array of stuff. It typically boils down to a small handful of techniques that we're going to use over and over again. Now, there are times when we would divert off that path, but it's kind of like an 80-20 rule, right? So using our techniques successfully against other people, that'll be important in a second. Now, here's the idea I want you to chew on. I'll give you two contrasting perspectives from my bearded experience. So years ago, as a brand new black belt back in 2011, I was in an interesting place, for me at least. I was in a situation where I was one of a handful of black belts in my area, especially in the city. And at the time, I don't know of any. There may have been some, but I don't know of any competitive black belts that were, people that were still competing at black belt in my city when I first got my black belt. And so it was this kind of new thing where I'm this young guy from Kentucky who's there, and there's really no one else around me that's doing what I'm doing. And I've got to lead the charge for my students and everyone else. And there was a lot of pressure on me, and there was some fear and anxiety associated with that. Because again, I didn't want to fail at black belt. I didn't want to be a failure at this position and as a leader to my guys. And so I remember when I would go into a lot of my matches early on, I would overanalyze the people that I was facing because I wanted to be prepared, right? And so if I knew who I was facing and I could find matches of them, I would watch them and I would zero in on all the stuff they're doing and overanalyze their game to the point where I would build these people up into something that they weren't. And then I would go in to compete against these people. And a lot of times the very techniques that I was trying to avoid, they would hit me with. A lot of times these were sweeps or things like that. And I remember as an example, my very first jiu-jitsu match as a black belt, the guy I went against, watched his matches beforehand, he sweeps me, gets on top of me, and then I escape. And then from there, the match ends up being very competitive. It ends, I think, it was a pretty high scoring match. I think it was like 12-15, and he beat me on 3 points. I'm passing at the end of the match, trying to get those 3 points back. I mean, it was a good battle. And I had several matches like that where I would either rally back to win after getting swept or getting, beaten initially in the early part of the match, or I would get very close to winning. And eventually it sort of cemented to the idea like, look, I belong at this level. You're not just this small guy from Kentucky, whatever. You're good, but you got to turn your brain off and you got to go. You have to just turn your brain off and go. You can't build these people up into something that they're not. Simple as that. And so what I do now, and the mindset that I take into competitions now that's been really useful to me, which has helped me win things like Nogi Worlds, Nogi Pans at 3 different weight classes, some other tournaments. Again, I'm not the best competitor out there, but I'm definitely above average, right? So the mindset that I take into it now is that I respect who is ever in front of me. I don't care if somehow a 6-year-old ends up in my division. If they're standing on the other side of the mat from me, like I'm coming after you, I'm giving you my best. By the way, guys, I know it shouldn't have to be said, but I'm using a little hyperbole here. So if a 6-year-old was across the mat, I'd have some questions, okay? But you get the idea. And so I always respect who's ever stepping across the mat for me because I have to imagine if they're in the black belt division with me, they're there for a reason. They're probably pretty good, right? The difference is that I don't overestimate their abilities. I don't blow them up into something that they're not. And even if I study them, I don't study them to really study their game so much as I'm looking at them going, what am I going to do to beat this person? What kind of techniques am I going to use? What is it in my game that I think could match well against theirs? A great example of this was a few years back. I competed against a black belt who's very good. He's won a lot of stuff. And I was watching his game. He typically pulls guard. And from there, he typically plays on his half guard, butterfly guard with a sort of slant towards playing to his right side, which for me would be passing to the left. But I noticed that sometimes he struggled with people passing to his right. And I can pass either way. So I was like, okay, there's one thing to keep in mind. And then I also noticed that he had a couple matches where he lost against guys who were able to pass with a backstep pass where they would get an overback grip over his neck and then they would backstep, which I have a good backstep pass. So I was like, okay, this is going to be my strategy. This is how my game is going to work. I'm passing to the right and I'm going over top with a backstep pass. That's how I'm going to try to win this match. And that's what happened, right? I was able to do that and we faced off each other a couple times. I've been able to do that. So again, I wasn't watching the match going, oh man, this guy's so good. Look at all this stuff and building them up. I'm respecting the guy's good. But what am I focused on? It goes back to the thing that we started this video off with. How am I going to use my techniques successfully against this person? How am I going to use my jiu-jitsu game versus their game? That is the game of competing. That's the goal, right? And that's it. And so again, the idea to chew on, Brent, would be if you're getting ready for a competition and you know your opponent, you have some chance to watch them, whether it's at the match or study them beforehand. Don't build them up into something they're not. Don't get all crazy about it. Just look at them and study their game and then think about how your game applies to it. And then when it comes competition day, all you're thinking about is what techniques am I going to use on this person? What techniques am I going to use to beat this person? That's all you're thinking about. Like in my mind, competition day, the only thing playing in my head is basically me doing mental reps of how I plan to start this match off or the techniques I plan to use against them. And I will typically repeat to myself the mantra of no hesitation because I want to remind myself that when I hesitate, typically I don't perform very well. But when I don't hesitate, even if I lose, I'm always pleased with my performance because I tend to do very well when I don't think and I just go after the techniques and I don't care about losing and winning. I'm just trying to use my jiu-jitsu against theirs. So that's been my experience and that's what works for me. Now, again, everybody's a little different, so you have to take this idea and you have to mix it up. You have to make your own version of this because we're all a little different. And again, we're all sort of remixing things, right? You take techniques from your coach and you sort of change them and make them your own. You have to do the same thing with the perspectives that you hear from other people. Listen to them, listen to these ideas I'm giving you, and then you try them out for yourself and you play with them and see what works for you. So anyway, that's the idea for you, Brent. Hopefully it helps you. Good luck in your future competitions. Talk to you guys next time.